It is February 18th, a Thursday, and this is episode number 15 of The Grail. Welcome aboard, all my friends out there, people interested in amazing handmade stuff. I've got them here. I've got the artists. I've got the creators. I've got the makers. You are at the right show. And today, it is an amazing guest. I know probably every one of you that is tuning into this show today has gone to a rock and roll or a country or a R&B or a jazz show, whatever kind of live performance that you've been to. Chances are that performer or those performers are using some kind of wireless equipment, whether it be a guitar, bass, or vocals. They're using it and you've seen it. It's just standard. But imagine being in late 60s, early 70s, and seeing a guy run around on stage with no cord plugged into his guitar. You immediately would be like, that's fake. You can't even comprehend it. But that is exactly what my guest today, Mr. John Nady, invented. He invented the wireless guitar and microphone. Could be one of the most monumental things to live performance ever invented. I'm telling you, it changed the game. Beyond. I mean, look, if you're looking at music, it's Fender, it's Gibson, and then it's a stomp box, and then it's Marshall, and then you have the Nady Wireless. And this man, the genius himself with a crazy high IQ, sat down one day and said, how could I do this? Some of the early people that bought it, the first band that bought it was Aerosmith. Second was the Rolling Stones. And from then on, it's just absolute history. John Nady is he deserves to be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame for this, and he is in the top 101 inventions or creations for rock and roll from, I believe it was Rolling Stone magazine. Anyway, what a guest. I can't even imagine just looking at something and going, what if we just got rid of the cable back then? It's so monumental. I mean, right now, I use a wireless mic a lot of times when I'm at shows. And early on when I was playing music, I did not feel like I was in a pro band until I had a wireless mic. Once I had that, I was like, all right, we're starting to get somewhere as a performer, taking it serious. As corny as that sounds, it's just real. John recently sold the company. He is, after 43 years, retired now. And congrats, John Nady, for a long, successful run at Nady Wireless. You guys are going to love this episode. Not only did he invent the wireless, but he also owned 3 of the best nightclubs in the Bay Area: the Stone, the Omni, and the One Step Beyond. So a lot of great stories here. Before I do get into the episode, I want to tell you about my sponsor, Banker Guitars. You do not want to sleep on Banker Guitars. I'm talking about a boutique handmade guitar, your personal rock and roll, country, blues machine. This is who Brent Hines, Scott Holiday, and Marcus King all go to when they want their guitars built by hand. I'm talking about Matt Hughes at Banker Guitars. Go to bankerguitar.com. Check out the selection. So many great things. The Carina V and Explorer, absolutely mind-boggling to me. But he has so many different cool things coming out right now. And follow his Instagram also. It is Mr. Banker Custom. And that is his Instagram. And tell him I sent you. Get it together. Nothing better than a guitar during the lockdown. Mr. Banker Custom is his Instagram. Banker Guitar is his website. Get a guitar. You've always wanted a guitar. Do it. Get one that is yours. Also, you know my other sponsor, Mark Brunot, and his podcast, A Rock and Roll Rabbit Hole. They have all kinds of episodes up now, and right now you can go listen to episode number 7, Songs That Have Cowbell. Number 7 is a deep dive into all the songs that have cowbell. You can find it on Apple Podcast app on your phone, Spotify, and a rockandrollrabbithole.com. Fantastic podcast, weekly show. Just a deep dive into every kind of nerd thing you could think about when it comes to rock and roll. You're going to love it. Go check it out, a rockandrollrabbithole.com. Now, quickly, just want to tell you about a couple shows I got coming up. Next week in San Diego, I'll be headlining 4 shows at the Grand Comedy Club. Okay, that is, what is the date of this? Let me look. February 26th and February 27th. 6:30 and 8:30 p.m. shows. 4 shows next week. And then I will be in Des Moines, Iowa. Yep, you heard that right. Des Moines, Iowa. I'm going to go freeze my ass off. So if you don't come down because you're being lazy, that is rude, because I'm flying all the way out there to freeze my ass off. And that'll be at Teehee's March 12th and 13th. Get your tickets. All right? That's 3 shows. 1 on Friday the 12th and 2 on Saturday the 13th. Teehee's Comedy Club. So yeah, a couple road dates. Can you believe it? Gonna get out there, get my shield and face mask and fucking suit and get on a plane and come tell some jokes. I love all of you. I love the support you have given me on the Grail. We are a new podcast, but we are chugging along. Please leave a review on iTunes. It greatly helps. And subscribe to the iTunes or my YouTube channel. Keep the candles lit. Here he is, Mr. John Nady. I got an old friend on today, Mr. John Nady. How are you, buddy?
I'm fine.
How long have I known you?
So far, what?
How long have I known you? I met you probably in
the
what?
late 80s.
Yeah, what year did you buy the Omni?
86.
86. So that's when I meet you.
Yeah.
86.
Yeah, we bought the Omni in 86. We had 3 nightclubs between 86 and 92.
Right. So it's the Omni.
The Omni in Oakland and the Stone in San Francisco, and then the one step beyond in Santa Clara.
And then what about the Cadillac Club in Fresno?
Oh, yeah, the Cadillac Club. That was right at the end.
Yeah, yeah.
And then the economy kind of changed and the music scene kind of tanked.
We'll get into that, but let's get into where did you grow up?
In the Mission District in San Francisco. I was born in Hungary, actually.
Wow.
And lived in Innsbruck, Austria until I was 6 years old. And we came out in the early 50s, and I lived in San Francisco in the Mission District.
You lived in San Fran, huh? And your parents, what did they do?
Well, my dad had been a government official and a senator and all that kind of stuff in Hungary in the late 30s and in the 40s. And then when the Nazis took over in 44, we had to flee. And we went to Innsbruck, Austria. And I was born right in Hungary.
Wow.
Right at the end of the war. And right at the border. And then we fled into Innsbruck. And I stayed there till 6 years old. And we came out to San Francisco.
Wow. San Fran was, it's totally like different now, of course. But the 50s, when were you a teenager there? What years were the teenage years?
In the early 60s.
Oh, early 60s. So pre-hippie and kind of what? Beatnik? What's the scene? You're rolling around the city?
Well, I wasn't tuned into the beatniks and all that kind of stuff. That was kind of far out for a teenager in those days. You know, I went to high school in San Francisco, and then I went down to Pasadena and went to college down at Caltech in Pasadena.
Oh, I gotcha.
And then in the early 60s, and then in the late 60s, I came up and went to grad school.
At Berkeley.
And that was where I kind of tuned into the whole scene.
Yeah, the rock and roll scene.
The human being and all that kind of stuff.
Were you into the Dead?
No, I was never into the Dead.
No?
No, I was more into blues, the British blues scene.
Gotcha.
Because when I was playing guitar, I would like listen to the blues artists like Albert King and all that kind of stuff, and then also the British blues scene, Eric Clapton and Mick Taylor and all those guys.
And then, is that when you start to get into guitar?
Yeah, I started playing guitar in the early '60s actually, and then but I didn't really play seriously until the late '60s, and then I started playing in bands after that.
Now, what do you go to college for?
Well, actually, I was a child of the '50s, and of all things, I wanted to be a nuclear physicist.
Is that right?
Yeah, and so I went to Caltech, and I was a little precocious when I was a kid, if I might say, and I studied physics books when I was 12 years old and stuff like that. Although I played sports and stuff, I wasn't like a complete nerd, but I did get into like science and stuff. So I thought I'd go and become a nuclear physicist. And I went down to Caltech, and I kind of lost interest in doing that, because I said, what can you really do with that? Because I chase a Nobel Prize or become a professor, and I didn't want to do that. So I was kind of evolving. And I went to college when I was 16.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I graduated when I was 20, so because I'd skipped a few grades in grammar school.
You got like genius IQ?
Well, I don't know, but
What is the IQ? You know?
Well, I mean, when I was like 12 or 13, it was measured like 175, 180.
Whoa. So you want to be a nuclear physicist?
Yeah, I wanted to be a nuclear physicist.
What do you do? Because I can't even wrap my head about that, but how long do you got to go to school to be a nuclear physicist?
Well, you generally have to go for a PhD, so you'd have to go through your 4 years of college and then maybe another 4 or 5 years for a PhD. I just went. What happened was toward the end of my time at Caltech, I decided that I wanted to not do that. So I was looking for what else I can do. I wasn't really like into electronics as a kid. I mean, I didn't take radios apart or anything like that. But I decided to, settle on a major. So I settled on electronics, to get a double E degree, electronics engineering, and then also minored in economics. And then and when I graduated, this was in '65, I was admitted to Harvard Business School and Cal Berkeley. And Cal Berkeley was where all the action was, and I had friends, having raised in the Bay Area, I had friends who went to Cal. So I decided to go to Cal instead. And I got my double E degree at Cal. And that's when I became like a real hippie and through all that stuff.
Just grew your hair out?
Oh, yeah. I always had long hair till the
yeah.
90s.
And what kind of scene is up there? Is it, okay, you're not into the Dead, but it's kind of acids around and stuff, right?
Well, there was some of the San Francisco band. I was mostly into blues and stuff.
Right.
The Dead were more like, I don't know, bluegrassy, country-ish. I just was never into the Dead.
You're into Peter Green, stuff like that?
Yeah, that was it. Peter Green, and I'd play along with the John Mayall records and all the blues cats that were happening in England. And
Cream?
And yeah, Cream.
Hendrix?
Not so much Hendrix, because he had too singular a style.
Yeah.
Although I copied a few licks here or there and went through a phase a little bit, played a few of his songs. But mostly the British blues scene. And then started playing rock, first with a blues band in the 70s, when the scene in the Berkeley and San Francisco was really at its height. I mean, in Berkeley, there were like 5 nightclubs that were all happening. And I think there's none now, as far as I know, with live bands every night.
How do you get into guitar? You buy your first guitar?
Well, what happened was I was down in Caltech in Pasadena, which is in the LA area, and in college college was kind of like my high school in the sense that in high school I was kind of because I was younger than everybody, and I was really into sports, but I was younger than everybody, and so I didn't really play on the sports teams and things like that. And at Caltech, I was 16, 17, and I played on the basketball team, played all the sports, and I was like real into sports and things like that. And I forgot your question, by the way.
I was saying, how'd you get into guitar?
Oh, yeah. Okay, so then when I was down there, partying more is what I was trying to get at. And I used to go down, I got really turned on to guitar one summer when I was up at Lake Tahoe. I was working as a lifeguard one summer in the early 60s, and there was a band at the American Legion Hall, and I remember standing there watching a guitar player play, and I thought it was really cool. He was playing Venture songs, and guitar only had song 40 Miles of Bad Road and Dwayne Eddy and stuff like that. And then I went to Caltech, and then the surf music scene happened. I used to go down to Santa Monica Pier and watch the Shantays and all that. And so I really got turned on to playing guitar. That was before the Beatles. And then when the music scene hit, I gravitated toward, I like the Rolling Stones always more than I like the Beatles, although the Beatles are great, of course.
Yeah.
And I was always into the bluesier end of it. John Mayall was a big thing.
So what's you're playing guitar? Is your dream to be like in a band and tour the world at the time?
Yeah, well, I had the regular dream we all had. Yeah, you had that dream once too.
Yeah. And, right.
I had in the 70s and 80s, I had my own little recording studio, and I made tapes of all the time of our songs and stuff like that. And the last effort I made was in '87. I recorded like 16 originals, and I spent a lot of time on them. And I was trying to be another Boston or something,
Yeah, Tom Schultz stuff.
Yeah.
Like real nerd and out in the studio.
Well, yeah. I mean, I always kind of identified with Tom Schultz in the sense that he was from MIT, and I was from Caltech. A nickname of both schools is the Beavers.
Yeah.
And he was 6'5", I'm 6'4", and it was a kind of and of course he's been a phenomenal success. And so I was trying to make recordings that didn't sound like Boston, but were like well produced. And so I did a big recording project. I had a 16-track studio and that I had built for myself. And it was really nice setup with drum room and misaligned walls, so you get no standing waves, and live end, dead end, control room and vocal booth and all that stuff. I made a bunch of tapes, but when they didn't go anywhere, probably because they were like 3-4 years behind the times.
Yeah.
At the time, because
spending long time making them.
Yeah,
by the time it's done, it's over.
If I had done them 3 years earlier, then it might have been, that's what I was told, the record people that we sent it to. So I kind of gave up on doing that. But we did the songs with, I played with, when I had the nightclubs, we had 3 nightclubs between 86 and 92. And then we had a fourth one in Fresno for a short period right before the end, before I shut them all down. But I had a band called the Nady Alliance.
Yeah.
And I had Jimmy Arsenault and then Dave Starr and Larry Holmes from Vicious Rumors. And they're an Atlantic recording artist. They've had a zillion albums out. But as a second band, they played with me. So we had a real good band. And we had fun playing with opening for a lot of the happening bands at that time. Because we featured a lot of 80s rock, heavy metal, and thrash, and bands like that. And so we had a lot of fun.
How do you get an idea to make a wireless guitar or microphone? You are the inventor of the wireless guitar, right?
Well, what we did was there was wireless microphones, being just a radio transmission device like a walkie-talkie or something. They were around, but they weren't usable because they didn't have the audio quality. And they didn't have what's called the dynamic range, which means that if you listen to them, the noise floor is too high, to hiss is too high, or if you scream, it overloads.
Yeah, it just sounded like a walkie-talkie.
Yeah, it didn't have the audio quality necessary. So it
was more stuff for like church, or maybe like news or something.
I want to use them in Vegas. There was a company called Vega that was on the market, and they used them in Vegas and stuff, and they'd use it for talking. And like they'd walk around with a wireless mic talking. In fact, I saw the Stones in 73, where Mick Jagger had a Vega microphone.
Sherwin-Vega or Vega?
No, Vega.
Gotcha.
And he used it to talk to the audience, and then he'd sidle over to a wired mic on a stand and grab that and use that for singing.
Really?
Yeah, because you couldn't sing through it. He would overload and something.
But he wanted like on the.
Well, he wanted to be able to just walk around and talk to the audience and put a showman thing.
On the Exile
but
tour?
He would never sing through it. He would just walk over, put it down, and pick up the wired mic and then sing through it.
Wow.
And that's what they were doing in Vegas and stuff. Of course, in Vegas they lip sync a lot, and so
right.
You get away with that kind of stuff. But so in doing in '68. I just had a moment where I just thought, hey, it'd be good to have a wireless guitar system. I wasn't thinking of a mic. I was thinking of a wireless guitar system.
Right.
Because I'd read that a couple of people had died from shocks, and people in those days, you on wet ground or something like that, or wet rug, and you'd touch your mic stand or your mic, and you'd be grounded differently. And in fact, the original lead singer for the Yardbirds actually died and got electrocuted doing that.
Ace Frehley also from Kiss.
Yeah, he didn't die, but
no, he didn't die, but he was going down the stairway, and then I guess he put his hand on the stairway, and it was a different volt or whatever.
And actually, the only thing that separated you from getting the full 120 volts, which can kill you, was a little 10-cent capacitor that blocked the current from doing that to DC. And anyway, so when I started doing it, in the first experience I had was friends with a guy who was a roommate of Elvin Bishop, who was in the Butterfield band at the time, which was a big deal. And this was when the San Francisco music scene was the scene. Everybody was here, Steve Miller, like you said, the Grateful Dead, Starship, Al Cooper, a bunch of names that younger people wouldn't even remember at this point. And so I showed Elvin Bishop, and he was kind of a showman kind of guy. And but in 1968, Christmas, there was a private party for just all the bigwigs in the San Francisco music industry. I mean, Santana, everybody was there. And Elvin Bishop got up and played with my first wireless that was very touchy, and had to be careful. I was there running it. And he ran around the audience and stuff like that. And I mean, I saw the shortcomings. I had to make a wireless that anybody could use that didn't require me to be there and play with it. And it was kind of noisy, but he would I would turn down the volume when he wasn't playing, so you wouldn't hear the hiss. And then when you played, you can't hear the hiss. And all the guys who were there, and these are all like idols of mine at the time, came up to me and said, this is great. You gotta really work on this, and it just gave me like inspiration to do it.
Now, how do you build it? Like the one that Elvin Bishop uses, is it your first one you make, or is it?
Well, no. It was like a very kludged together first wireless, and after that, I started tackling the problems that you would need to do so it would have a foolproof unit that anybody can use, and that addressed the issue of the noise. And in doing that, I came up with the circuitry which is now used by everybody, a process called companding. And it enables you to have a dynamic range, the difference between clipping at one end for an overload signal and the background hiss on the other end, and increase it to wide enough so it acts like just a regular wired guitar. So, and the reason that was important for guitar is because lead guitarists, and that's the way I play with high gain, which means that the signal is clipped at the input of the amp, and the lower level it's clipped, the more overtones you get and the more distortion and sustain you get. So heavy metal rock, which is like the worst case situation, like you play through a boogie or something like that, it has high sustain, it really clips the signal small. And what that does is it brings up the noise floor, because you've clipped the signal, and so the difference between the signal and the noise floor is less. And so that's why you have a lot of hiss. And so I addressed that issue, and I ended up getting a patent on the circuit, and then that was what the industry needed, to be able to have a wireless mic and not just a guitar system. And then after I made the mic, then I started getting requests for, a guitar. I started getting requests for a mic, and so I adapted the circuitry, and made a handheld mic also, and that was in the late 70s. We got on the market in late 77, so it took me 9 years to get it to the point where I could get it together, and then I had to.
So are you just building them in your garage at the time?
Yeah, at the time I bootstrapped my way up. I didn't have like a big investment. I borrowed $50,000 from my mother, which I repaid over the years. My brother and sister were allowed that to go on, and anyway, so that was the only money we ever got invested in the company.
Now, when you're building it, explain to me. Do you just have at the time like a stereo receiver, and you tuned it into a channel, and then it would pick it up?
Yeah, one of the issues with wireless microphones is the frequency that you operate on. In those days, the only band that was totally legal, 37 megahertz Citizens band, and at different frequencies, propagation and RF pickup is different at different frequencies. And 37 megahertz is okay for a citizens band or truckers going down the
CBs
road and stuff, but it's not good for close in use because it doesn't propagate well, and the audio quality is limited even with our circuitry. So we had to use another frequency, and that was the only frequency that was allowed. So we went rogue and we got a tuner, an 88 to 108 FM tuner that we bought from Advent. It was just a box with you may have seen one around with a big knob in the front.
Yeah.
And we took that and changed the circuitry over to what we needed. And then people would tune in between empty channels. In their location, there was always empty channels.
Yeah, because when I remember seeing the first ones, they were called Nasty.
Yeah, they were called.
And it had a box, and it had a dial in the middle and two antennas. And then the other thing was like the metal thing on the guitar or on the end of the microphone. It looked like
it was a snap-on transmitter that we used for the mic. Because my original models were I didn't have money for tooling, so we did an old-fashioned sand casting. I found a guy in Sacramento who would sand cast these things, which is just really you make a mold into a sand, really, and then you just pour the metal in there, aluminum in there, and then blow away the sand, and you'd have one model, and you'd have one housing, and then you just do it that way. So that's how we did in the beginning, and to adopt that to a microphone, the only way I could do is just snap it in.
Just snap it in. So it basically had this kind of mic end here built in.
Yeah, where the normal XLR connector is.
Yeah.
It had a little stub coming out of the.
Yeah. And how do you choose the name Nasty at the time?
Well, for a while I got another friend of mine, because when I started the company, I needed engineering help because we had to hire people to make the units and stuff like that. And this guy was his name was started with STE, and so we changed that from Nady STE to Nasty or STY.
Yeah.
So it was called the Nasty Cordless. But then he left after about a year and a half, and Nasty Cordless was kind of a name that you had to explain all the time. And
yeah, like what were like priests and stuff wanted to use it or something. I once heard that, like, and then they didn't want it to say nasty or whatever on that.
Well, our original logo, it was based on a guitar pick that I like, a triangular pick, kind of like a shield logo, and the Nasty logo was easy to change to Nady, just the ST part, the D, and so we changed it to, in 78, we changed it to Nady, and that's been our logo ever since.
Now, once you get it going, the first units with the box and everything, how do you go see Mick Jagger, or who is the first superstar?
Well, after let me backtrack a little bit and lead into that. After the initial use with Elvin Bishop and so on, there were a couple of Chicago blues guys, Buddy Guy, Albert Collins, and they had a thing in their act where they used a 200-foot cord, and they'd walk outside the club and walk around the club using this long cord.
Yeah.
So they'd come to town and play at the Mandrakes and clubs that are no longer around, New Orleans House or whatever. And I befriended them, and whenever they came to town, and this was during the period of '68 through '76 when I first got, really started the company and had my patent and all that kind of stuff. And they were like beta testers, and I would set them up and they'd use it, for the gig, but I didn't sell any, but they would just use it for the gig, and then so they gave me good feedback.
Now, some of the
and then in '78,
Some Girls Tour.
The first band we actually sold to was Aerosmith. They were playing at Cow Palace in December of '77.
Oh wow!
And we sold them some systems.
And how much were they back in the day? Big money, like 20 grand?
Well, no, they were our top line. So we had a lower price system for everybody's use that didn't work quite as well. And then we had the high end use. And since they worked in the 88 to 108, the high end use had our companion circuitry.
UHF models?
No, they were VHF 88 to 108 megahertz.
Gotcha.
And those are our so-called blue systems. And then we had the black systems, and those are similar, except they didn't have the companion circuitry. And so they had noise issues. that I had mentioned earlier. But we would sell them with a Toshiba receiver, because next to our plant in Oakland there was a distributor for Toshiba tuners.
Oh, yeah?
We used a Toshiba 335 tuner, and we sold that. And bass players could use it okay, and guitar players who played country western or something that wasn't high gain, soaring, heavy tone kind of guitar. Anything other than that, it would be adequate for that. Or people used to use noise gates and stuff like that,
right?
Which had come into being at that point. After things really took off after '77.
People had to be going crazy, right?
Yeah,
I mean, we're talking 70s. I remember like AC/DC in '78 was playing Oakland Coliseum, the day in the green.
Right.
And Angus came out on Bon Scott's shoulders.
Right.
And he went all the way across the stadium. And I'm thinking, well, that's fake. Because you're a kid. And
no, I know. And nobody knew what it was. During the '70s, like I was telling you earlier, I was playing in a band all during the '70s, various bands that I had. And we were the first wireless band in the world. And I remember playing like at Treasure Island here in the San Francisco Bay Area for drunken sailors in the officers club. And I'd walk out in the audience, and these guys would start whacking away at my strings, thinking I was just faking it. And so I would hold the guitar up, and they'd,
and they'd hit it and make noise.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that's
they realized it was for real. But everybody's used to it now. But in those days, it was really just unusual to see that.
I was talking about it a couple of days ago. There's key things in rock and roll that are complete monumental inventions. Of course, the Strat, the Les Paul, the Marshall, and then the wireless. Those are key things in rock.
Well, one of the things I'm proud of, if I may say, was that about 6-7 years ago, a guitar player had the 101 greatest moments in rock, and it included, artists as well as inventions, like you say, Fender guitar and the Beatles, and it was a combination of 101 moments. And they selected my invention of the wireless guitar and wireless microphone as number 68, and I was always really proud of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's so true. I mean, you got to think, there's nothing more annoying than when you're rocking and your chords are all over your feet and everything, especially when you're an arena act like Aerosmith or the Stones. I mean, because Jagger, Jagger is so known for running the entire arena, back and forth. No one understands that. They just take it for granted, like, oh, it's just the wireless mic. But back in the day, you had a 50-foot cable or 20-foot. That was it.
Well, speaking of Jagger, we caught up with them down at the Anaheim Stadium and at the last date of their '78 tour.
Right.
I flew down to L.A. and I showed him in the band the wireless, and they said, we got to have this for the next tour. So before they went out in '81, you remember those years, they used to go out every 3 years.
Yep.
So they called us up, and I met with them and stuff like that, and we outfitted the whole band, 12 channels of wireless. And that was the first year they did if people remember the '81 tour, they had a pink and black scrim cloth.
Yep.
And they had two wings going way out into the audience on either side. That was all built around our wireless.
Wow.
And so we had 12 channels, so even the backup singers, even though they didn't pick up the microphone, it was just on a stand, it was also wireless. And so that gave us like a real boost. And in fact, he was on the cover of Time magazine with our Nady microphone stuck in his pants,
Yeah.
a suggestive pose, and that was great. So we caught up with him, and he wanted me to go on a tour with him.
Yeah.
For a whole year, and I said, if you'd asked me 10 years ago, I'd go, but I got a company to run. But I was, so I went to the first couple of dates.
Did he want just to make sure the stuff's going?
Yeah, he said, hey, come along the whole tour. We're going to tour the world for a year, and I said, I can't do it, and you don't really need me anyway. So I went to their first stop on their tour, an '81 tour, which was in Colorado, and Boulder, Colorado, and then they came to San Francisco, played a couple of gigs
at the
there.
Candlestick.
Yeah.
Now, was there any problems?
No, they played at the Oakland Coliseum.
On the indoor, you mean?
No, outdoor.
Out
the Coliseum, the arena, not the arena, the outdoor.
Oh yeah. That's '78.
Yeah, no, that's 81 also.
81. I saw my Candlestick '81.
Yeah.
Now, when you show it to him in '78, did you bring him the unit? Does he use it live that time in Anaheim?
In '78, yeah. Yeah,
And is he
I
like,
had a
oh my
working
God?
prototype, and I'd already sold some units, like I said.
Yeah.
And it was like summer of '78, and so he used it for the whole gig, and he loved it. So he said, we're going to build a whole act next time we go out around this. And so that's why they decided to do those two big, runways going into the audience, and they've done it every tour since then.
Now, the 78 model he uses has the snap-on sand-casted thing. But
No, by '78, we had the FCC had opened up another frequency because they saw this coming, so they allowed use of the VHF frequencies, which is 170 through 216 megahertz, and that's where channels, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, that's where they're located.
now, do you have to buy those channels?
No, what happens was, in any given town, you only have every second channel. So like one town may have 7 and 9 and 11, another town had 8, 10, and 12. And also, is a technical thing, but in the signal of it's a 6 megahertz wide band, like 174 to 180. In the last megahertz band, there's a 75 kilohertz spread that's open between the audio carrier and the video carrier. So we put all our frequencies in those frequencies. So the advantage of this was it didn't require tuning. You just turn it on. And previous systems you had to tune in.
Auto scan?
Well, I didn't have auto scan yet because it was fixed frequencies. That didn't come until another decade. All
Got
that
ya.
stuff. That was what we had going by 78, 79. And so 81, when he went out on tour, he used a fixed frequency unit. It was that black transmitter. If you look at any VH1, shows or like that, I remember seeing one about the hair bands of the 80s.
Well, the mic I know that's the most famous has the green sticker on the back and the red
sticker. Yeah,
and that's Def Leppard photograph.
Everybody.
Yeah, everybody.
Everybody in the 80s.
Everybody used that mic.
Everybody used that mic, and
that thing was like $5,000, right?
No, it was about $1,000 a channel, which in today's money is more, of course, but it was affordable for these guys. They didn't, and so they, speaking of everybody in the 80s, there was this Tom Cruise movie that came out a couple of years ago, Rock
of Ages.
Rock of Ages.
Yeah.
And they called us up. They wanted to be authentic. So we sent them from our archives, one of those microphones that you mentioned with the red and green dot indicating off and on.
You still have those?
Well, we don't. We have some, archives. We haven't sold it for 30 years, but
those things are great though. You had to have that big mic clip, and then it had the on-off switch that was kind of inside there, right?
Yeah,
and then you unscrewed it and put the battery in.
Yeah.
And to me, it was. If you had one, I remember a couple Coke dealer singers would have them. You know what I mean? Like the bands that weren't signed, and you'd be like, oh, they got a wireless, the Nady one, they're good one. Because later,
well, we were the only game in town in the 80s. I mean,
right.
There was nobody else in that business who was competing with us. That didn't happen until the 90s.
Well, later you have the 201 and the 101, which are like $400 or something, right?
Yeah.
But that was like a pointy mic.
Yeah. Well, then we went to different shapes because by then I had enough success and money to do fancy tooling. I didn't have to do sandcast models anymore. I mean, we had we had the momentum and so on. So, and we were growing and so on. So, yeah, we introduced the 101 and 201 in the late 80s, and that was the most popular wireless microphone for about a 4-year period in the world.
Well, that changed the game.
Yeah,
because now everybody can be
affordable, and it was easy to use, and it worked great, and I mean, we run across people all the time that still have their 101 and 201s from the 80s. And one thing I want to say is that when our very first model, as far as the audio quality, the range, and the dynamic range, and the operating range, and that's just the sound, in '76 is as good as the best mics today. The difference is the best mics today operate on different frequencies, have more bells and whistles, are easy to use and stuff like that. But as far as just the audio quality and performance, we had that in '76.
Wow.
It was essentially indistinguishable from a hardwired mic cord or guitar cord. So, there's no way you can improve on that. And when we had competition in the early '90s, it took many years before people started catching up because, we had developed the circuitry and so on, and we were kind of had all that experience working with the top bands and getting feedback and stuff like that, both during the development time and in the 80s. So our units became progressively easy to use, and then we segued into UHF when that came around in the early 90s. And
The UHF ones were like the superior ones, right?
well, actually, they're superior in the sense that at the time there were more frequencies available in the UHF. That's changed since then. There was kind of a perception that it's UHF, which is ultra high frequencies versus very high frequencies. So it was, in 500 megahertz to 800 megahertz bands instead of 174 or whatever to 216, which was the VHF band. But actually, as far as propagation for a wireless microphone, the VHF microphone is actually better because the wavelength of the transmission at that frequency is such that you have less dropouts.
Oh, wow.
Dropouts are caused by a reflection in a room, and if the waves are kind of like sine waves, if people remember that from high school, go above and below, kind of like, and they oscillate out sideways over and over again. Anyways, they when you have a dropout, the reflected waves in a particular location you're playing at would hit where a trough hits a peak of these sine waves, and it cancel each other out. You'd have a momentary dropout.
I always thought it was the opposite, that the UHF meant no
what I'm trying to
dropouts.
say is, I don't want to get too technical, but in UHF, the frequencies, wavelengths were shorter. And so there was more opportunities for waves and for troughs and peaks to cancel each other out. And at VHF frequencies, the wavelength is longer, so there's less potential. Now, we addressed that with a diversity, which is 2 receivers and 2 receiver front ends, picking up the signal slightly in different location, with 2 antennas coming out of the unit, and then picking a better signal. And there was various forms of diversity. I won't bore you with the details, but we had that first too, the diversity in wireless microphones, so that the top end models could eliminate all dropouts. But as far as UHF versus VHF, as far as performance, is actually better, and because when you go to UHF, it's the transmission process and the way you generate the higher frequencies is slightly noisier. So you actually get better signal noise and better dynamic range in a VHF versus UHF. But UHF is the way everybody goes nowadays.
Well, yeah. It's
because there's more frequencies, and you have selectable frequencies like 1,000 channels, and you can just
1,000 channels.
Yeah, 1,200, as many as 1,200. We have a couple of 1,000 channel systems where you could just pick a frequency, and or it'll pick it for you, an open frequency, and then you just turn it on. I mean, now it's like I said, the main difference between the early wirelesses and that we had and now, it wasn't so much the performance. It was convenience of use and the way you could use many channels in one location and find open channels that work together and all that kind of stuff. That's the kind of improvements that have been made.
Now, are dropouts completely eliminated now?
Well, they're what they call virtually eliminated. So I mean, it's still possible, but they're way less, and most likely, and it'd have to be a pretty reflective room or whatever to have that happen.
What people don't know, dropout is early wireless systems. You'd be singing, and if you maybe turned a little,
if you went to a location where the reflected wave canceled out the actual wave coming from the transmitter in space, then you'd have a very, very localized spot. Like you move 3 inches one way or the other, and it would go away. And that's why diversity antennas with 2 different receivers combining a signal worked, because even though the antennas are only 4 or 5 inches apart, one's in the dropout zone and the other one isn't, and the chances of both of them being in the dropout zone are zero. So only in very radical cases would you get a dropout with a properly designed diversity system.
Now you do the patent, right? At the time, you're the guy that has the wireless, and then Samsung comes around. Do you sue them, or what happens? So, do you own the wireless thing?
No, they paid us royalties for years, and then it got to where they decided, and the other people who were starting to get onto the market, but it was Samsung originally at first, decided using our variation of our circuitry. They actually used a variation that wasn't as quiet as ours. It was like 5-6 dB noisier. So whereas ours would be totally quiet, theirs would have a slight hiss to it. Nevertheless, it used the basic premise of our patented circuitry. And they were paying royalties, but they decided that they were going to fight the patent on the grounds that, and you can find any patent on the grounds that, well, some of this was taken from this technology and some was taken from that technology, and you combined it, and use it
and
for
make
new
it their
application. And, you know, you can make that argument. You can make that argument with the wheel, because somebody could say they saw an apple on the hill, and that's where you got the idea. So, anyways, we didn't want to get involved. You know, we saw the patent fights going on with these bridge pickups. You know, the whammy bar bridge pickups. There's several of them out there all suing each other.
Floyd Rose and Kaler and all those guys
suing each other and spending hundreds of thousands of dollars and diverting their energies from growing their business. So I just settled with them for a nice big 6-figure sum and gave away my patent.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Now, once that happens, it seems like a floodgate of wireless comes, right? Shure, Sony.
Yeah, Shure. It got started in the very late 80s, early 90s. And, of course, they're the elephant in the room because they've been around for 70, 80 years. And there isn't a pro audio or music outlet that doesn't sell Shure. You know, they're one of the most omnipresent brands in the music business. And so they talked to us originally in the mid-'80s about possibly doing a wireless for their brand. But they decided the time wasn't ready, so they waited another 5-6 years, and then ended up doing it on their own. So they're probably the biggest wireless company now in the world.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. They seem like they're the industry standard now, right? It's just like,
well, based on their brand name, I'll argue that we have. One of the things that drove us was when I was started, people would say to me, because they didn't understand wireless, and they would say, "Why would anyone pay $100, $500, $1,000 to replace a cord which costs $5?" And I said, they'll do it for all the obvious reasons, showmanship, safety, et cetera, et cetera. But I said, you'll see in time wireless will cost less than some wired cords. And that became true. We had wirelesses now that cost less than some cables by people like Monster Cable and stuff like that.
Yeah, they got like the $100 cable.
$100 cable, And you can buy a wireless, perfectly good professional wireless for $49, $59 these days. So
wow. They're that cheap.
Yeah, I mean, like our DKW1 has all the audio quality. The only thing it's missing is bells and whistles and the ability to run more than 4 channels at the same time. But as far as the audio range, audio quality, hiss, and whatever, it's better performing than even, very expensive UHF wireless with tons of bells and whistles and selectable channels and auto scan and infrared download and all that kind of stuff.
Wow.
And it's only, you can get it for $39, $49. So it's become, like much easier to get a wireless system. And that's why it's so prevalent these days.
What's the biggest selling thing at your company now? Because you have all kinds of stuff, right?
Well, we saw the handwriting on the wall in the 70s, in the 80s, excuse me, at the late 80s. And we tried to introduce a couple other products, but we were so successful with our 101s and 201s that the sales stream and the dealers and everyone just wanted the 101s and 201s because we couldn't make them fast enough. So we didn't get into these other products till the late 90s, excuse me, when Shure and Audio-Technica and Sennheiser and AKG and all these bigger names and wired microphones started, pushing their versions of wireless microphones, and so we had to diversify. And I had shifted my production to China in 1983 from in-house because that's the only way I could produce the tens of thousands a month we were having to.
Yeah, just too many wirelesses to me, man.
Yeah, it was just too hard to set up. So I went to China, and I was actually the first company in the pro audio music business to produce in China. The next company is Behringer. They came in '88. And then companies like Shure and just about everybody now has stuff made in China.
Now, before you're in China, you're over in Emeryville in your factory, right? And you're trying to build these 201s.
Well, no, I was at a factory in Oakland.
And you're trying to build the 201s? How many guys are in there building them?
No, the 201 is when we went.
That's when it starts?
Actually, we went to China production a couple of models before the 201. We had the 501.
Right. Oh, yeah, the 501.
Yeah, we had the 501. That was kind of halfway there. It was about $400 or $500 versus $300 for the 101 and 201.
Now you're building the 501 at the Oakland factory. How many employees at
Well, we started building them, and it was a real hassle. Well, in the 80s, I had over 100 employees.
Wow.
A lot of them were salespeople, and we were, this was before the internet, so we were doing, selling the catalogs and all the kind of outlets there were. So we had a lot of salespeople on the phone and stuff like that. That was, the market has changed considerably. Marketing techniques have changed since then. But anyways, that's what we were doing. And the 101 and 201, we got started in 87, and we had already been in China for 3 or 4 years. And we had nobody in China knew how to make audio gear.
Wow. You go over there. How do you find somebody?
Well, I found somebody through a friend who was at offices in Hong Kong, but production in China. And they were making, they weren't making any audio gear. They were making car refrigerators.
Oh.
You don't see them anymore, but they used to have refrigerators you'd have in a car, and you'd plug it into a cigarette light or whatever. And these were like actually big in Europe and Asia and stuff. They never were that big in the United States. But he was like doing a booming business in that. I went over there and I talked to him. I said, this audio stuff, you can really move a lot. And so I basically taught them how to, produce these kind of things and how to test them and how to make them work right and stuff. And it was a company we were with for about 20 years. And then the owner died and the business dissipated and went to other suppliers, but we were with them for a long time, and they produced all our wireless gear for many years.
Wow. Now, who's doing the translating for that? Had to be like a long time, like teaching someone how to...
They all spoke English.
Oh, they did. But you're teaching them how to make this 201 circuitry?
Well, yeah. I mean, we gave them the circuit. That wasn't the hard part. Wasn't how to make a circuit. We'd give them the circuit board and the parts list and everything else. But it was how to test it. And how to produce the quality and stuff that we needed. So that was the main thing. I mean, now there's tons of companies in China making all kinds of pro audio gear and knockoffs of other people's stuff, or producing stuff for companies. I mean, everybody in the pro audio business. I mean, even companies like PV, which prided themselves on everything made in the USA, has a significant portion of their stuff made in China now.
Yeah.
And because that's just the way it worked out. Because they have the infrastructure and they have millions of people, and they're hardworking, whatever. And so they were able to do that, take over the manufacturing. So that's pretty much what it is. I don't think there's any wireless made in the United States that I'm aware of. Maybe electrosonics.
Your high-end stuff's made in China?
Yeah, our high-end, everything is made in China.
Everything's made in China. So nothing over...
All we do now in the United States is make variations. We may make some changes for a specific customer or something like that. So we have a small production line that does that. But basically everything is made in China.
Wow. And so now, of course, you don't need that big factory anymore, right?
Well, what you were asking earlier about, I'm into other stuff. So when we were already in China in the 90s and we had to segue into more products, then that was when Chinese companies started learning how to make pro audio gear. Before that, it was Japanese companies were doing it, and some Korean companies, but nobody in China. And Korean and Japanese companies went to China for their production, and then we were there. And so we started partnering with a bunch of companies to make all kinds of audio gear, and we, now have a broad range of audio gear stretching from microphones to mic stands to amplifiers and mixers and effects processors and all kinds of stuff.
Now let's get into the nightclub biz here. You're peaking, your shit's selling gazillions, and you decide to open a nightclub in Oakland.
Well, what happened was in 1986, we introduced a Lightning guitar, which you may have seen my band.
Yeah, the wireless guitar.
Wireless guitar, and we had a publicity guy in New York, and he wanted to do a press thing where we went to the Limelight nightclub, which used to be a Gothic kind of church with all stone and everything.
Oh, the Limelight in New York.
Yeah, Limelight New York.
Awesome club.
And we did a press press party. And so to do that, my band at the time was going to go out there and we were going to play like a set in front of all these journalists and other people that are there, showing us playing with our own complete wireless guitar. Not just a wireless system, but a wireless guitar.
Yeah, the unit's built into the
guitar.
guitar.
We practice someplace, and a friend of mine was a real estate agent. He was listing a former Italian social club called the Liguri Club in 48th and Shattuck Oakland, and that we could practice there. And so we practiced there, and
So he's trying to sell it.
yeah,
and so are you just renting
make a
it?
long story short, he talked us into buying it because there was a dearth of nightclubs. Fillmore was in the city, but others nightclubs had closed. There was a real opportunity to do a nightclub, and so I thought that would be a cool thing. There was a big nightclub with a big stage where you were in a band in those days.
It was a massive space.
Yeah, it had a bunch of rooms. It was just really nice. It was an Italian social club, and it even had the bocce ball courts in the back of the stage and all that kinds of stuff. So it was a really nice building, and so we bought it and opened our first nightclub. We called it the Omni because we had all kinds of different kinds of music. But the music we were more successful with, that was the most fun, was all the hair bands.
Yeah. Now, when you buy it, you open it and you're starting to book some bands, and there's a family, which is the Coronas and Herrera. They have the Stone, and now when it first opens, are they battling you?
Yeah, they were big competitors of ours.
Right.
And they were more established. They'd gotten their start in the late 70s, early 80s. Yeah,
and they had the three where they had the Keystone Palo Alto, Keystone Berkeley,
yeah.
and then the Stone in San Fran.
But they got out of the business in '86, and we bought the Stone. Took over the lease and bought the club. I mean, we kept the name and everything else.
Right. But at the time, it's kind of this battle, and then what happens? Does Bobby say, "Hey, I want to get out. Do you guys want it?"
There was a Corona family and a Herrera family.
Right.
There was Big Bob, who was older Bob, and the younger Bob, who was in his 30s.
Freddie Herrera.
And Freddie Herrera. And Freddie Herrera got out of business. And so we hired, after we bought the club, we hired Bobby Corona for a while. And he did bookings for us at our
Right.
clubs. And we first got the Omni, and then we bought the Stone a few years later in '89, and because we were competing for 3 years first. And then a couple of years later, we bought the One Step Beyond, which was the biggest of the clubs. Yeah, this was a 12,000 square foot room, and we had a huge stage, like a concert-sized stage, 24 by 36, and all that kind of stuff. And it's the biggest of the nightclubs, and so he was doing booking for us. And then we added a half interest in the Cadillac Club in Fresno. But then, like I said earlier, the business crashed. After the Iraq War ended.
Yeah. Well, a few things happened. The earthquake came and wiped out that on-ramp from Oakland to
the
Broadway.
business at the Stone was dying down, and because the easy freeway access to where it was located in San Francisco, which was right off a freeway off-ramp, that freeway was demolished.
Yeah.
And so it took more hassle to get to the club.
Yeah, it used to be you could go to the Omni and the Stone in about 15 minutes.
I know, it was just...
So you could see a band...
Both were right off the bridge.
Yeah, you could see one band at like 10 and you go, hurry up, let's get over and we can see the headliner at the Stone.
Well, we did that. As owners of the club, we did that. In fact, on New Year's Eve, we'd go to all three clubs.
Yeah.
So we'd drive for 45... We'd start off at the Stone and then drive down to Santa Clara.
Yeah.
Which is like a 45-minute drive, and then drive up and end the night at the Omni. And we did that on New Year's Eve a couple of times.
Yeah.
But and then in '89 and '91 we expanded to 3 clubs. But then in '91, after the Iraq War, the music scene changed. It changed from like the hair rock, hard rock, and stuff like that. Changed to like the grunge.
Yeah.
And the crowd became different, and bands that had toured around and played our clubs and this was happening across the country. They used to draw like 800 people, let's say. All of a sudden they draw 250 people. And so what had been a money-making, and we never had a bad show, ended up with a lot of bad shows and stuff like that. And so...
Yeah, I remember it was good times. It was like we were just booking, and everything would sell out. And then all of a sudden it'd be like, oh... Man, there was, and it would almost be like, man, 300. That was great, like you'd
well,
be.
What you're alluding to is you were helping us book for a while.
Yeah,
working for us. But I was busy at Nady Systems, and this was like a sideline business, at a nighttime, my night job.
Yeah,
and it just got to be a hassle for the fact that it was so. Not as successful as it had been before, and it was losing money now all of a sudden. And so we just closed it down in '93, the whole operation.
When you at what point? I remember I was on vacation in Cabo, and then I called Jimmy, or I faxed him or something, and he said, "Hey, I think we're closing next week." At what point are you sitting around and you go, "Let's just close all these"?
Well, it took, we hung in there for, business started going bad in 91. We hung in there until 93. So it was like 2 years of putting up with that. But it wouldn't change, and it wasn't going to get any better for a while. And it was national. I mean, these acts were bombing everywhere.
Yeah.
Between the changing music tastes, and there was a kind of a mini recession people don't remember, but at that time, right after the Iraq War, and money was tight, and a lot of the kids that used to come to the shows, young 20-somethings and whatever, a lot of them didn't have jobs, and so it just kind of killed the scene, and so we got out of it.
Now, when you close them, you try to sell the Omni and the Stone. Because they sat empty for a long time. The Stone, somebody bought it, right?
Well, the Omni was our club. We bought the club.
You own the property.
Yeah, I owned the property. The other two, we just took over a lease.
Gotcha.
So we had to settle with the lease owners, the actual owners on the lease. And then the Omni, we just gave it up.
Donated it?
No, we were buying it from the previous owners.
Right.
They were funding it.
Oh, I got
you. We just said you can have it back.
Yeah.
And we just stopped paying the mortgage, and then they sold it at auction.
You said recently you went by there. I read that it was like a co-op. It looked amazing. I saw photos of it in the Chronicle or whatever. But they had like kind of gutted it and made it like a cool big open space, right?
Yeah, we went over there actually a couple of months ago and talked to the guy who's putting it together and saw it for the first time. In the interim, after we moved out in 93 till very recently, it was husband and wife pair artists owned it, and they lived there. But we recognized the main thing, but there had been changes made. You remember in the main bar down below, which is actually a separate room from the performance room. And there was an upstairs that was all changed, and there were like little offices where there had been nothing before. And so it was kind of fun going back and seeing the changes after all those years.
It was the worst neighborhood, man. I remember at one time, Paul Ratt was down in the basement booking over, and a drive-by shooting happened. A bullet went right through that lower office. Like, that was a horrible neighborhood there. Remember that?
Well, it was on the edge of being a horrible neighborhood.
Right.
It wasn't in East Oakland or anything.
No.
Where, I never heard of any drive-by shootings. There was
a crack house across the street.
House across the street. It was a motel, and they had druggies there. But other than that, it was kind of a middle-classy kind of neighborhood. I mean, it wasn't that bad, but it was right on the edge of being bad.
That was the first crack house I ever really saw. Like, it was a real crack house. Like, there was just crack zombies out front and stuff. It was wild.
Well, you were working there too, weren't you?
I was working there, yeah.
So you were there. I was not working there, so I didn't see a lot of stuff.
Yeah, like you'd go to lunch at Genova's, to get a sandwich, and dudes would just be out front, like, because that's really when crack is like ground zero, the 80s.
Right.
And it's just taking over, and you're seeing guys out front just like crack zombies, and you're like, whoa, look at that,
I never saw that.
Yeah,
honestly, I never saw that myself, but I was only there very short periods during we had a Hofbrau there, and I'd go there and have lunch, and be in and out real quick. But
yeah,
I was working at Nady Systems, which was a couple of miles away. And
it was
I didn't really see any of that, but I can believe it. And I heard about it, but I never saw it myself.
All right, man. Thanks for talking to me, brother. And I'm glad I'm glad I've known you for half my life.
Yeah, we met in the 80s, late 80s.
Yeah, we used to go skiing.
Yeah, we did that a few times.
Yeah, we went skiing. We played softball. Yep. Remember we had a softball team?
Yeah, we had a good team too.
Yeah, we did. We were badass.
Yeah.
We played off golf links. I rode when I was coming to your house.
Right, that's right.
There it was. I was like, we used to play there, man.
Yeah.
And man, I can't even tell you.
That's when you were a rock star.
Yeah, right?
Now you're a comedian.
Yeah.
Star.
I had so much fun in those clubs, though. They really are like my everything from my life is from those clubs. Like all my friends, and then
that was like really the apex of the music scene. It's never been the same in this area, the live music scene. We had all 3 clubs going, and then during that period of time, the Fillmore had closed down because of the earthquake, and they were closed down for 3 or 4 years. So we filled in the gap. We had all kinds of top name bands play there.
It was amazing.
Yeah,
you know,
a lot of fun.
I mean, you know, I have people at my house, and I open up the calendars, and I look, John. What'll blow your mind is if you look early on who we had and later how big they became. Like you look and you go, look at this, White Zombie. You know, at the time they were like a middle band on a Wednesday night. And then later, you know, Rob Zombie becomes the biggest star ever and directs films, and you know he's huge. And stuff like Faith No More, and you know, and even Jerry Garcia played there millions of nights. And
we had actually bands that were bigger played there under false names. Like we had Kiss played there.
Yeah, Kiss played
there. Santana played there a few times.
Yeah, Soft White Underbelly, Boys to Colt.
And they would go in under a different name but the club was really a nice club, so they'd play there.
I remember we'd get a call and it'd be like Secret Show.
I tried to get Mick Jagger to play there, you know, one of his opening shows, but he played nightclubs before they went on tour, but he was always in the East Coast.
Yeah.
So we never quite were able to do that. That would have been a big coup if I could have gotten the Stones to play.
Still, though, man, I mean, Garcia played there a lot. That's huge. And, you know, Kiss. Like, when Kiss played there, it was like, you know, they were still huge.
Well, they couldn't say that they were Kiss, so they had some other name.
Yeah.
Like Blue Oyster Cult. They had another name.
Soft White Underbelly.
Yeah, they had different names, but the word would get out, and they would have a huge line out front.
Yeah.
And all the.
Which one was your favorite room out of those?
Well, the best room was the One Step Beyond.
Yeah.
You had the huge stage and whatever.
Well, that was like a massive concert van. Remember, you could close half the club.
Yeah, right. We had a partition, like a bunch of slide down warehouse doors that would close off the club, so it'd be intimate for like 400 or 500 people, and then we'd open it up. So you know, a really big show, and you could have 1,000+ people in there, 1,500 people. But that was my favorite venue. But the favorite club was the Omni, because that was our first one.
Yeah,
it was closest to home, and our offices, you know, that ran. We were called California Concerts, and we ran it for a while out of the basement of the Omni and stuff like that. So that was kind of the favorite. And we owned the building at the time and so on. So
yeah, man, it was those are some good times, dude. You know.
Yep, it's fun while it lasted.
All right, man. Thanks for talking to me, huh?
Yeah, thanks for. All right.
Oh, remember? Oh, I forgot. Remember we used to do the rap nights there?
Oh yeah.
Oh man, we did the Too Short video there. And all the rappers, we did the rap nights on Sunday at the Stone.
I remember guys out front doing the wheelies.
Yeah, remember that?
And the cops were getting pissed off. Yeah,
that was early on, man.
Yeah.
Early on hip hop in there, man. I just remember that. All right, brother. Thanks, man, for talking to me. There he is.
Hey, great. Thanks for having
John Nady, man. You got a website, right? Nady.
Nady.com.
Nady.com, and you still sell wireless. Do you still sell the 201? Is it called something else now?
No, we have different models.
Right. But it's
that came and went from the 80s to the mid 90s or so.
But it's kind of the same similar thing, but way better.
Well, those were. I mean, anybody who has a 101 and 201 that's in good shape, you know, hasn't been run over by a truck or something.
Yeah.
You know, keep it. It's perfectly good wireless, and it has all the tone qualities and sound and everything that matches the best of any wireless.
That's awesome. All right, thanks, man. There he is, John Nady.
All right, thanks a lot.